A lone silhouette stands motionless in the prairie dawn, revolver raised against the blood-orange sky. The year is 1883, and in Redemption Valley's unforgiving landscape, justice is measured in lead and gunpowder. The sharp crack of a pistol shatters the morning stillness, followed by 6 tin cans exploding into the air in rapid succession. A deadly symphony that would soon echo through saloons and ghost stories alike in this forgotten corner of the Dakota Territory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The early morning mist clings to the valleys of Fairfield Farm like a reluctant ghost as 20-year-old Clara Thorne moves with practiced efficiency through her morning chores. The rooster hasn't even announced the day yet, but Clara has already drawn water from the well, fed the horses, and collected eggs from the temperamental hens that seem to resent her intrusion. Her worn leather boots leave perfect imprints in the dew-kissed grass as she crosses the yard, her father's old pocket watch tucked securely in her apron. A reminder that time waits for no one, especially not farmers. Clara's honey-blonde hair is pulled back in a practical braid that swings rhythmically between her shoulder blades as she works. The rising sun catches the light freckles that dust her sun-browned face, evidence of days spent under the harsh Dakota sky. Her hands, though calloused from years of farm work, move with an unexpected grace and precision that seems at odds with her surroundings. The same hands that can plow a straight furrow or deliver a foal can also perform feats that would leave most men speechless. If only they knew. The Thorne family farm sits nestled between rolling hills at the edge of Redemption Valley, a modest spread that Clara's father, William, carved out of the wilderness 15 years ago when he brought his young family west from Pennsylvania. The small 2-story farmhouse, built of local timber and riverstone, stands as a testament to William Thorne's stubborn vision, each nail and board representing a small victory against the unforgiving land. 8 years of drought, dust, and determination have shaped every acre into something worth protecting, especially since Clara's mother passed 3 winters ago, leaving her and her father to manage alone. A simple white fence surrounds the vegetable garden where Clara's mother once tended tomatoes and peas, singing hymns as she worked. Beyond that, fields of wheat stretch toward the horizon, now beginning to turn golden under the morning light. The red barn, recently repainted by Clara's own hand, houses their small herd of cattle, 4 horses, and the precious seed for next year's planting. It's not much by Eastern standards, but out here it represents a king's ransom in sweat equity and dreams. Clara pauses by the old oak that stands sentinel at the edge of the property, her fingers brushing against the bark where her initials are carved alongside her mother's. She allows herself 10 seconds of quiet remembrance, no more, no less, before continuing toward the chicken coop. Sentimentality is a luxury that farm life rarely accommodates, as her father often reminds her. The morning's quiet routine shatters at the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town. Clara's hand instinctively moves to her hip where a revolver would normally rest, but catches herself. Not here, not now. The farm is neutral territory, or at least it has been until today. Her heart quickens as she recognizes the distinctive cadence of multiple riders approaching with purpose rather than casual visitors. William Thorne emerges from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Years of battling the elements have etched deep lines into his face and threaded silver through his once dark hair, but his shoulders remain squared and his gaze direct. The former Union Army captain still carries himself with military bearing, though he rarely speaks of what he saw during those bloody years. He nods at Clara, a silent acknowledgement that she should remain by the chicken coop while he approaches the gate. The riders materialize through the morning haze, their horses kicking up dust as they approach. Clara counts 5 men, led by Jackson. Blackwater, whose reputation for ruthlessness has spread through 3 territories. His black duster and wide-brimmed hat give him the appearance of a raven, a harbinger of misfortune that has descended upon their homestead. Behind him ride the Fletcher brothers, Silas and Ezra, whose dead-eyed stares have made grown men look away in the saloon. Flanking them are 2 more men Clara doesn't recognize, though their worn gun belts and watchful postures speak of men accustomed to violence. "Morning, Thorne," Blackwater calls out, his voice carrying an unnatural smoothness that does nothing to mask its underlying menace. "Fine day for a chat about water rights, wouldn't you say?" He adjusts his leather gloves with deliberate care, never taking his eyes off William. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, paws at the ground impatiently as if sensing its rider's malicious intent. Clara watches from behind the chicken coop, her fingers tightening around the egg basket until her knuckles turn white. Jackson. Blackwater is the right-hand man of Victor Caldwell, the railroad baron whose arrival in Redemption Valley 6 months ago has transformed the once peaceful farming community into a landscape of fear and coercion. Where once neighbors helped neighbors, now they avoid eye contact in town, afraid of being associated with those who have resisted Caldwell's land acquisitions. "We've been through this, Blackwater," William responds, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his stance. "My water rights were legally established when I homesteaded this land. The creek runs through my property before it reaches Caldwell's holdings." Blackwater's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Ah, but you see, Mr. Thorne, there have been some changes in the territory recently. The new judge has reviewed those old claims and found some irregularities." He produces a document from his coat with a flourish. "Mr. Caldwell is now the legal owner of all water rights in the valley. He's generously offering to purchase your land for a fair price, of course." Clara notices Silas Fletcher's hand, resting casually on his holstered Remington, a well-worn weapon that has ended more than one land dispute in Caldwell's favor. The morning sun glints off his silver spurs as he shifts in his saddle, eager for any excuse to use the gun he pats like a beloved pet. "This land isn't for sale," William says firmly, his jaw set in the stubborn line that Clara knows all too well. "Never has been, never will be. My wife is buried on this property, Blackwater. You know that." The Fletcher brothers exchange meaningful glances, their hands hovering near their weapons, but Blackwater raises a hand, maintaining his false civility. "No need for hasty decisions, Mr. Thorne. We'll give you time to consider the offer. Say," and weak, his smile widens, though his eyes remain cold as winter ice. "Though I should mention, unfortunate accidents tend to happen to folks who take too long to make up their minds." As the men begin to turn their horses, Ezra Fletcher's gaze falls on Clara, who has stepped out from behind the chicken coop. His eyes trail over her with calculated insolence, lingering in ways that make her skin crawl beneath her modest dress. "Shame if anything were to happen to your pretty daughter, old man," he calls out, earning a sharp look from Blackwater that does nothing to diminish the threat. Once the riders have disappeared down the road, Clara rushes to her father's side. "Pa, we can't let them—" "No," William cuts her off, his voice stern but trembling slightly. "We're not going to do anything rash. I'll ride into town tomorrow, speak with Sheriff Patterson." He places a weathered hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle despite years of hard labor. "Your mother wouldn't want us starting trouble." Clara bites her lip, knowing what she must do but unable to tell her father. As soon as darkness falls, she'll make her way to the abandoned silver mine in the North Ridge, where Jeremiah "Silver Eye" Sullivan had taught her everything she knows about handling a six-shooter, the same Jeremiah who had once saved her father's Life during the war, creating a debt that was repaid by allowing him to live as a recluse on the edge of their property. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. The same man who recognized in 12-year-old Clara a natural talent with firearms that bordered on the supernatural. What no one in Redemption Valley knows, not the sheriff, not Victor Caldwell, and especially not Jackson Blackwater, is that Clara Thorne isn't just some farmer's daughter in a calico dress. In a hollowed-out space beneath the floorboards of her bedroom lies a custom Colt peacemaker with ivory grips and her initials engraved in silver. The perfectly balanced revolver has been waiting patiently, just like Clara, for the moment when hiding would no longer be an option. The legacy of Deadeye Diana Thorne didn't die with Clara's mother. It just went underground, like a seed waiting for the right moment to sprout. Most folks in town remember Diana Thorne as a devoted farmer's wife who succumbed to pneumonia 3 winters ago. Few remain who recall the legendary female sharpshooter who once toured with Hargrove's Western exhibition, whose feats of marksmanship drew crowds from St. Louis to San Francisco. Viewers still know that before she married William Thorne and settled into respectable obscurity, she made sure to pass her exceptional skills to her only daughter. The remainder of the day passes in tense silence, father and daughter completing their chores, while both their minds race with unspoken worries. As evening approaches, dark clouds gather on the horizon, promising a storm that matches the brewing trouble in Redemption Valley. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of rain and the whispers of coming violence. William sits at the kitchen table cleaning his old army rifle, more a symbolic gesture than practical preparation. As Clara knows, the weapon hasn't been fired in years, and her father's eyesight isn't what it once was. She brings him a cup of strong black coffee and watches as his fingers, once so sure on a trigger, now tremble slightly as they work the cleaning rod. "Pa," she says carefully, "what if Sheriff Patterson can't help? He's just one man, and Caldwell has a small army." William sighs, his shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "Then we'll appeal to the territorial marshal. There's still law in this land, Clara, even if it sometimes moves slowly." He looks up at her, his eyes reflecting both determination and fear. "I didn't survive Antietam and build this farm from nothing to lose it to a man like Caldwell." Clara nods, not trusting herself to speak. She doesn't have the heart to tell him that Sheriff Patterson was seen riding out of town with Caldwell's men 2 days ago, or that the territorial marshal hasn't been seen in these parts since Caldwell's. Judge took the bench. Instead, she busies herself with dinner preparations, her mind already mapping the path to Silver Eye's cabin. As darkness falls and her father retires to bed, exhausted from the day's tension, Clara waits until his snores rumble through the small house before sliding out of bed fully dressed. She retrieves her mother's revolver from its hiding place, the weight of it familiar and comforting in her hand. The ivory grips have been worn smooth by years of practice, the barrel oiled and maintained with religious dedication. She straps the gun belt around her waist, concealing it beneath a dark riding coat. The storm has held off, though lightning occasionally illuminates the distant mountains, promising that rain will come before dawn. Clara slips out the back door and makes her way to the stable where her mare, Willow, waits. The horse, sensing her rider's urgency, remains quiet as Clara saddles her and leads her away from the farm, taking care to avoid the main road where Caldwell's men might be watching. The path to Silver Eye's cabin winds through dense pine forests and across rocky terrain that few venture to traverse, especially after nightfall. It's a journey Clara has made countless times over the years, first accompanied by her mother, then alone after Diana passed. Tonight, however, the familiar trail feels ominous, each shadow potentially concealing one of Blackwater's men. Clara's. Thoughts drift to the morning's confrontation, to Blackwater's snake oil smile and the way Ezra Fletcher had looked at her like a wolf sizing up its prey. She thinks of her father, still believing in a system of justice that seems to have abandoned Redemption Valley the moment Victor Caldwell arrived with his money and his hired guns. Most of all, she thinks of her mother, who had hung up her guns and exhibition costume to become Diana Thorne, respectable farmer's wife, but who had still insisted that her daughter learn to protect herself in a world where women had few protections. The time may come, Diana had told 12-year-old Clara during their first lesson, when being able to shoot straight might be the difference between safety and suffering. A gun is just a tool like a plow or a hammer. It's the hand that holds it that matters. As Clara approaches the ridge, where Silver Eye's cabin perches like an eagle's nest overlooking the valley, she spots the faint glow of lamplight through the trees. The old sharpshooter is awake, perhaps already aware of the trouble brewing down in the valley. Smoke curls from the chimney, carrying the familiar scent of coffee and tobacco into the night air. Before Clara can even dismount, the cabin door creaks open, and Jeremiah Silver Eye, Sullivan's gravelly voice, breaks the silence. Bit late for social calls, ain't it, girl? The old man steps into view, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight that occasionally breaks through the gathering clouds. Despite his 70 years, his posture remains straight as a lodgepole pine, and his eyes, including the milky white left one that earned him his nickname, miss nothing. A Winchester repeater rests easily in his hands, a reminder that Silver Sullivan never opens his door unarmed, unless, he continues, his good eye narrowing, this visit has something to do with those vultures I saw circling your farm this morning. It's Caldwell, Clara says, tethering Willow to the weathered hitching post. His man Blackwater came by this morning with the Fletcher brothers and 2 others I didn't recognize. She climbs the rough-hewn steps to the cabin porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath her boots. They're after our water rights now. Silver Eye spits off the edge of the porch, the gesture conveying more eloquently than words his opinion of Victor Caldwell. Been watching that sorry lot make their rounds? 4 farms burned out in the last month, and now they've set their sights on Fairfield. He steps aside, gesturing toward the cabin door with his Winchester. Come on in. Seems we've got things to discuss. Inside, the one-room cabin is sparse but immaculately organized. Gun racks line the walls, each weapon cleaned and maintained with devotion bordering on religious. Yellowing wanted posters from across the frontier paper. One wall, some so old the ink has faded to near invisibility. Others fresh enough that the reward money still tempts. Maps of the territory are pinned to another wall, marked with notations in Silver Eye's distinctive hand, locations of ambushes, hideouts, and trails unknown to most. A cast-iron stove radiates heat from the corner, a pot of coffee bubbling atop it. The scent of gun oil, leather, and tobacco permeates the space, the smell of a life lived on the razor's edge. Silver Eye pours 2 cups of coffee from the pot, the thick black liquid steaming in the cool night air, and settles into a hand-carved chair, its wood worn smooth by years of use. Your mother knew this day might come, he says, his voice softening at the mention of his former pupil. Diana Thorne had sought him out shortly after Clara was born, determined that if her daughter was to grow up on the frontier, she would have every advantage Diana could provide. Why do you think she made me promise to teach you everything I taught her? Diana wasn't just accurate with a firearm. She was smart. New trouble follows certain kinds of talent, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Clara wraps her hands around the warm coffee cup, remembering her mother's laugh when she'd hit her first bullseye at 8 years old. Pa wants to talk to Sheriff Patterson tomorrow. Silver Eye's laugh is bitter as a winter wind. James Patterson is a good man, but his hands are tied tighter than a rustler at a hanging. Caldwell's got half the territory's lawmen in his pocket and the other half too scared to move against him. He sets his cup down with a decisive clink. "No, girl. Time for talking's done." Rising from his chair, Silver Eye moves to a locked trunk in the corner. The key hangs from a leather thong around his neck, and Clara watches as he opens it with reverent care. From within, he withdraws a wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl, its surface etched with intricate designs that catch the lamplight. "Your mother's pride," he says, opening the box to reveal a matched pair of Colt peacemakers, their ivory grips gleaming. Custom-made by Samuel Peterson himself, finest gunsmith west of the Mississippi. She only used them once together in that business down in Helena. 12 seconds, 12 shots, 6 men who needed killing, and not a single innocent harmed. The Montana marshal himself called it the cleanest shooting he'd ever witnessed. Clara's eyes widen. She'd known her mother was skilled, had learned from her touch and her lessons, but the full extent of Diana Thorne's reputation had been carefully shielded from her. "Why didn't she keep them both? I only have the one." "Because your father asked her to give up that life when they married, and she loved him enough to do it." Silver Eye carefully lifts one of the revolvers, checking its action with practiced efficiency. "But she was smart enough to know that sometimes trouble finds you whether you're looking for it or not. That's why she made sure you'd be ready." For the next hour, Silver Eye drills Clara relentlessly. They move outside to the shooting range he's set up behind the cabin, where targets of varying sizes and distances challenge even the most skilled marksman. Using specially crafted wax bullets that reduce noise but maintain accuracy, they work until Clara's arms ache and her eyes burn from concentration. She draws, fires and reloads with fluid grace, her movements a dance passed down through blood and practice. The night air fills with the muffled pop of gunfire and the soft thud of bullets finding their marks with unerring precision. "You're faster than your mother was," Silver Eye observes as Clara splits a playing card at 20 paces, the wax bullet, tearing it cleanly down the middle. "But speed isn't everything. Tomorrow we work on strategy. Blackwater's men won't come at you straight on. They're snakes, the lot of them. They'll try to get inside your head first, making you doubt yourself. That's when mistakes happen." He demonstrates a complex draw technique, his weathered hands still swift and sure, despite his years. "Your mother understood something most gunslingers never learn. It isn't about being the fastest, it's about being smarter than the other fellow." Reading his intentions before he even knows them himself. As they wrap up the session, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats breaks the night's silence. Both Clara and Silver Eye freeze, weapons ready. Through the darkness, they make out a lone rider approaching at a gallop, pushing their mount hard up the treacherous path. Clara positions herself behind a large boulder, her mother's Colt trained on the approaching figure. Silver Eye melts into the shadows of the cabin porch, his Winchester at the ready. They wait in practiced silence as the rider draws nearer. "Clara! Mr. Sullivan!" A familiar voice calls out, and Clara lowers her weapon slightly as she recognizes Elizabeth Patterson, the sheriff's 18-year-old daughter. Her dark hair streams behind her as she guides her lathered horse up the final stretch of path. "Lizzie!" Clara steps from behind the boulder, though she keeps her gun hand ready. "What in heaven's name are you doing up here this time of night?" Elizabeth dismounts in a rush, her riding skirt covered in dust, and her normally composed demeanor shattered. Her face is stark white in the moonlight, and her hands tremble as she secures her horse. "I followed you," she admits, her voice unsteady. "I've been watching you ride this way for months now. I had to know where you were going all those nights." Her eyes dart from Clara's drawn weapon to Silver Eye's watchful stance. "My father. They've taken him." Clara's blood turns to ice. "What do you mean, taken him? Caldwell's men. They came to our house an hour ago, Blackwater and the Fletchers. Said Dad was under arrest for corruption. Elizabeth's voice breaks. It's a lie. My father never took a dishonest dollar in his life. They're holding him at Caldwell's ranch. I heard them say something about making an example of him at sunrise. Silver Eye curses softly, exchanging a meaningful glance with Clara. How many men at the ranch? At least 15, Elizabeth replies, her composure returning now that she's delivered her message. Most of them hired guns from Montana Territory. They've got my father locked in the old slaughterhouse behind the main house. She takes a shaky breath, her hands clutching the saddle horn for support. There's more. While I was slipping out the back, I overheard Blackwater talking to one of Caldwell's clerks. They're sending men to Fairfield Farm tonight. Something about searching for papers. Water deeds, I think. Clara and Silver Eye exchange alarmed looks. The original water rights documents for the entire valley are hidden in a strongbox beneath the floorboards in William Thorne's bedroom, the same hiding place where Clara keeps her mother's journal of shooting techniques. Papers that would prove Caldwell's new claims are fraudulent, signed by a judge who has no jurisdiction in Dakota Territory. Pa's alone, Clara says, already moving toward Willow. If they find those papers, they'll kill him and burn the farm to cover their tracks, Silver Eye finishes grimly. Just like they did to the McAllisters last month. He turns to Elizabeth, assessing the young woman's resolve. How good are you with a firearm, Miss Patterson? Elizabeth's chin lifts, a flash of steel entering her eyes. Better than my brother's. Father made sure of it after Mother died, said a woman alone needs to protect herself. Lightning illuminates the three figures on the mountainside, followed by the distant rumble of thunder. The promised storm is moving in, matching the brewing violence in Redemption Valley. We're going to need help, Clara says, checking her mother's Colt before returning it to its holster. Blackwater's got too many men for the three of us. A slow smile spreads across Silver Eye's weathered face. Who said anything about just the three of us? He produces a tarnished silver whistle from his pocket and blows it 3 times in a specific pattern. The sound carries across the ridge, seemingly swallowed by the night. Your mother wasn't the only one with connections. The Guardians of the Divide have been watching Caldwell since he first set foot in the territory. The Guardians. Elizabeth asks, confusion evident in her voice. I thought they were just campfire stories. Most effective stories have some truth. To them, Silver Eye replies, strapping on a second gun belt and filling his pockets with ammunition. Former lawmen, military scouts, and a few reformed outlaws who've banded together to protect the frontier from men like Caldwell. Your father knows about them, even helped them on occasion, though he couldn't officially acknowledge it. Clara stares at the old sharpshooter in dawning comprehension. That's why you live up here. You're one of them. Have been for 30 years, he confirms without a trace of apology. Your mother was too, before she married your father and retired. The silver wings she always wore on her choker, that was the mark. Clara's hand moves unconsciously to her throat, where her mother's silver wing pendant hangs on a leather cord beneath her shirt. She'd always thought it a simple memento, a trinket from Diana's performing days. Silver Eye notices the gesture and nods. She gave it to you for a reason, girl. Figured you might need it someday. The sound of approaching riders interrupts them, not from the direction of town, but from deeper in the mountains. 4 horsemen materialize from the darkness, each wearing a duster despite the warm summer night. Their faces are partially concealed by bandanas, but their eyes are alert and their movements coordinated as they dismount. Sullivan, the lead rider acknowledges, pulling down his bandana to reveal a face marked by a long scar across the cheek. Got your signal? Trouble with Caldwell? James Blackwater and the Fletcher brothers paid a visit to Fairfield Farm this morning, Silver Eye explains tersely. Now they've taken Sheriff Patterson and plan to raid the Thorne place tonight, looking for water rights papers. The scarred man nods, unsurprised. Been expecting this. Caldwell's making his final push to control the valley. He extends a hand to Clara. Nathan Ford, I knew your mother. Fine woman with an even finer aim. These are my associates. Samuel Three Fingers, the Elkhorn Kid, and Mrs. Margaret Reed. Clara's surprise must show on her face at the last introduction, as the smallest of the riders removes her hat, revealing a stern-faced woman in her 40s with steel-grey hair cut short for practicality. "Don't look so shocked, girl," Mrs. Reed says dryly. "Women have been guarding this frontier since before men thought to write the rules down." She checks the action on her Winchester with practiced ease. "Now what's the plan? I assume we have one beyond standing here waiting for the storm to catch us." Silver Eye spreads a map on the hood of an old wagon, weighing down the corners with stones. "Caldwell's ranch is here, 10 miles southwest. The slaughterhouse where they're holding Patterson is here, separated from the main compound. Meanwhile, Fairfield Farm is here, 5 miles east of town." He draws lines with his finger. "We'll need to split up." "I'm going to warn Pa," Clara says immediately, her tone brooking no argument. "If Blackwater's men are on their way, he needs to be ready." Elizabeth steps forward. "I'll go with Clara. 2 riders will attract less attention than a group, and I know which of Caldwell's men were sent to the farm. I heard Blackwater giving the orders." Silver Eye nods slowly. "The rest of us will head to Caldwell's ranch to free the sheriff. Ford, you and Mrs. Reed approach from the north. The Elkhorn Kid, Three Fingers, and I will create a diversion from the south." "And after?" Clara asks, already calculating how long it will take them to reach Fairfield. "If Pa and I retrieve the papers, where do we meet?" "The old mission church," Ford answers, pointing to a spot on the map. "It's been our safe house for months. Father Thomas is sympathetic to our cause. Caldwell tried to force him out when he wanted the land for the railroad." As they prepare to depart, Silver Eye pulls Clara aside. "Take this," he says, pressing the second of her mother's matched Colts into her hand. "Time you carried them both like she did. Remember what I taught you. It's not about being the fastest, it's about being smarter than the other fellow." Clara finishes, securing the second revolver in her belt. "I won't let you down, or her." The old sharpshooter's eye softens for a moment. "Never thought you would, girl." He glances toward Elizabeth, who is checking her saddle cinch. "The Patterson girl, she's steady." Clara nods. "Steadier than most men I know. Her father made sure of it after her mother passed. She can handle herself." "Good, you'll need that." He hands her a silver star, not a lawman's badge, but a symbol etched with an eagle's wing. "Show this to Father Thomas when you reach the mission. He'll know you're with us." Thunder crashes overhead as Clara and Elizabeth mount up. The summer storm finally breaking around them. Rain begins to fall in heavy sheets, soaking them instantly, but providing perfect cover for their departure. Lightning illuminates the ridge as the 2 young women spur their horses down the treacherous path, racing against time and Caldwell's men. Behind them, Silver Eye and the 4 guardians mount up, heading in the opposite direction toward Caldwell's ranch and the imprisoned sheriff. The night has transformed from one of practice and preparation to a desperate race to save everything Clara holds dear. As her horse navigates the rain-slick trail, Clara's mind races. This morning, she was a farmer's daughter doing chores. Tonight, she rides as her mother's daughter, a guardian in the making, with 2 ivory-handled Colts strapped to her waist and generations of courage in her blood. Lightning splits the sky above Redemption Valley, and for a moment, Clara imagines she sees her mother riding beside her, back straight and eyes focused on the horizon. Then the vision is gone, washed away by the torrential rain, leaving only determination in its wake. The rain makes it impossible to maintain top speed on the dangerous mountain trails, forcing Clara and Elizabeth to slow their pace once they reach the valley floor. The storm has transformed the usually dusty landscape into a treacherous expanse of mud and swollen creek beds. They cut across country, avoiding the main roads where Caldwell's men might be watching. How far ahead of Blackwater's men do you think we are? Clara shouts over the downpour as they navigate a steep embankment. An hour, maybe less, Elizabeth calls back. I heard them say they were waiting for the midnight watch change at the ranch before heading to your farm. Clara checks her father's pocket watch. 11:15. Not much time. The storm worsens as they approach Fairfield Farm, the wind driving the rain horizontally and making it difficult to see more than a few yards ahead. Lightning strikes illuminate the landscape in brief, ghostly flashes, revealing the familiar silhouette of the farmhouse in the distance. As they draw closer, Clara notices something wrong. No lamp burns in the kitchen window where her father always leaves a light when she's out after dark. The barn door swings wildly in the wind, banging against the frame when it should be securely latched. She raises a hand, signaling Elizabeth to stop and take cover behind a stand of cottonwoods that borders their property. Something's not right, she whispers, drawing one of her mother's Colts. The farm's too dark. Pa never goes to bed without securing the barn. Elizabeth slides her rifle from its scabbard, her movements as practiced as Clara's own. Could be they got here before us, she whispers back, scanning the rain-drenched yard for movement. Clara strains her eyes against the darkness, searching for any sign of intruders. A flash of lightning reveals a horse tethered behind the barn. Not one of their own. The animal is still saddled, suggesting its rider arrived recently and in haste. There, she whispers, pointing. At least one's already here. What's the plan? Elizabeth asks, checking her rifle's action with quiet efficiency. We can't just ride in. Clara weighs their options, remembering Silver Eye's lessons. We approach on foot from different directions. You circle around to the back of the house, through the orchard. I'll come in from the side near the well. Stay low and quiet. If Pa's in trouble, they'll be keeping him inside where it's dry. They separate their horses in the cottonwood grove, tethering them where they'll stay dry and quiet. The girls remove their spurs, stowing them in their saddlebags to eliminate any betraying jingle as they approach. Clara feels a strange calm settle over her as she moves through the darkness toward her home, rain sluicing off her hat and duster. This is what her mother had prepared her for all those years. Not just the shooting, but the thinking, the planning, the ability to keep her head when everything else was in chaos. She approaches the farmhouse from the east, using the woodpile, and well as cover. Through the kitchen window, she catches glimpses of movement, a shadow passing before a faint light. Someone is inside, moving with the confidence of a man who believes himself unobserved. Making her way to the side door that leads directly into the kitchen, Clara tests the handle. Unlocked. She eases it open, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges, a sound normally lost in everyday activity, but magnified in the tense silence. Inside, a single lantern burns low on the kitchen table, casting long shadows across the room. Clara slips in, water dripping from her duster onto the worn floorboards. She can hear male voices from her father's bedroom across the hall, 2, maybe 3 men, arguing in hushed tones. The old man claims he doesn't know where the papers are. One voice hisses. Silas Fletcher, Clara recognizes with a jolt of anger. He's lying, another responds, this one unfamiliar. Blackwater says the documents are here somewhere. Tear the place apart if you have to. What about the girl? Silas asks. Blackwater wanted her alive for questioning. She's probably still in town, the unfamiliar voice dismisses. By the time she gets back, we'll be long gone, and this place will be ashes like the others. Clara's blood turns to ice at the casual mention of burning her home, but she forces herself to remain calm. First rule of a gunfight, Silver Eye always said. Know where everyone stands before you make your move. A floorboard creaks behind her, and Clara whirls, one Colt drawn and aimed in a fluid motion. Elizabeth stands in the back doorway, finger to her lips. She holds up 3 fingers, then points upward. 3 more men upstairs. Clara nods her understanding. 6 men total, Worse odds than she'd hoped for, but better than she'd feared. She gestures toward her father's bedroom, mouthing "Pa" silently. Elizabeth nods and raises her rifle, indicating she'll cover the hallway, while Clara checks on her father. The two young women move in perfect synchrony, as if they've practiced this maneuver countless times instead of working together for the first time. Staying low, Clara makes her way to her father's bedroom door, which stands partially open. Through the crack, she can see William Thorne tied to a chair, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. His face is bruised but defiant as Silas Fletcher leans menacingly over him. "One last time, old man," Silas says, pressing the barrel of his revolver to William's temple. "Where are the water rights papers?" "I told you," William replies, his voice steady despite his obvious pain. "I don't have them. They're filed at the land office in Bismarck." "Liar!" The third man in the room slams his fist into William's stomach, causing him to double over as much as his bonds allow. "Caldwell's man at the land office says they were never filed. You kept them and we want them now." Clara feels a cold rage build inside her, unlike anything she's ever experienced. These men had violated her home, beaten her father, and planned to burn everything her family had built. Her finger tightens on the trigger, but Silver Eye's voice echoes in her memory. The difference between a killer and a protector isn't the gun, it's knowing when to shoot and when to wait. Before she can decide on her next move, heavy boots thump on the stairs behind her as one of the men from upstairs descends. Elizabeth presses herself against the wall, hidden in shadow as the man passes the hallway, calling out to his companions. Nothing. Up there but girls' things, no sign of any papers. Clara locks eyes with Elizabeth across the hallway, a silent communication passing between them. The odds have just shifted slightly in their favor. Before the man can reach the bedroom, she nods once. Elizabeth steps into the hallway, her rifle raised. "Drop your weapons," she commands, her voice remarkably steady. "All of you, now." The man in the hallway freezes, then reaches for his gun. Elizabeth's rifle barks once, the sound deafening in the confined space. The man crumples, clutching his shattered knee and howling in pain. Clara kicks open the bedroom door, both Colts drawn and aimed at Fletcher and his companion. "Step away from my father," she orders, her mother's guns gleaming in the lantern. Light. Silas Fletcher's face contorts with surprise, then ugly amusement. "Well, look who decided to join the party, the farmer's pretty daughter." His gun remains pressed to William's head. "Drop those fancy pistols, girl, or I decorate the wall with your pa's brains." Outside, the storm rages on, thunder crashing. Like cannon fire as Clara Thorne stands at the threshold of the moment her mother had prepared her for all her life. "I said, drop those fancy pistols," Silas Fletcher repeats, pressing his revolver harder against William Thorne's temple. "Don't. I think I won't pull this trigger, girl." Time seems to slow for Clara, her mother's training taking over. Without looking away from Fletcher, she registers everything in the room. The positions of all three men, her father's subtle head movement as he tries to create distance from the gun barrel, the distance to the oil lamp on the dresser, and the sound of the two remaining men upstairs, their boots now moving rapidly toward the staircase. Clara doesn't lower her weapons. Instead, she smiles, a cold, dangerous expression that transforms her face from a farmer's daughter to her mother's daughter in an instant. "You must not know who I am," she says, her voice unnervingly calm. "Or who taught me." In one fluid motion, Clara's right hand flicks upward. The first shot extinguishes the oil lamp, plunging the room into darkness, broken only by lightning flashes through the window. Her second shot, fired blind but guided by years of practice, shooting in all conditions, strikes Silas Fletcher's gun hand. His howl of pain and rage mingles with the crash of thunder outside. Clara dives to the floor as return fire erupts from the other man in the room, bullets splintering the doorframe where she'd stood a heartbeat before. From the hallway, Elizabeth's rifle barks twice more. answered by cries of pain as one of the men descending the stairs tumbles down the remaining steps. "Pa, drop!" Clara shouts, rolling to her right and coming up on one knee. William Thorne doesn't hesitate. Despite being bound to the chair, he throws his weight sideways, toppling to the floor just as a lightning flash illuminates the room. In that split second of visibility, Clara fires both Colts simultaneously, one at Fletcher, who's struggling to switch his gun to his uninjured hand, and one at his companion, who's trying to use the bed as cover. Both shots find their marks. Fletcher drops, clutching his shoulder, while his companion slumps against the bed frame, his gun clattering to the floorboards. "Clara!" Elizabeth calls from the hallway. "Two more coming down." "I'm out," comes Elizabeth's urgent voice as her rifle clicks empty. Clara moves to the doorway, stepping over the first man she shot. Keeping her back to the wall, she peers into the darkened hallway, where two more of Caldwell's men are seeking cover behind overturned furniture. A floorboard creaks, giving away one man's position. Clara's shot takes him in the leg, dropping him with a curse. The last man fires wildly, his bullets embedding in the wall inches from Clara's head. "Last chance," she calls out. "Surrender or join your friends. To hell with you," comes the response, followed by the sound of breaking glass, the front window being smashed as the man tries to escape. Clara steps into the hallway, both guns raised, but the man is already halfway through the window. She lets him go. They have more pressing concerns. Pa. She hurries back to the bedroom, where William Thorne still lies on his side, chair and all. "I'm all right," he grunts, as Clara slices through his bonds with her hunting knife, "though I reckon these ribs will be telling tales for a while." Once freed, William struggles to his feet, leaning heavily on his daughter. "Clara, those shots, how did you—" "Later, Pa," she cuts him off, hearing moans from the injured men. "We need to secure these fellows and get those papers. More will be coming." Elizabeth appears in the doorway, her father's spare revolver now in hand. "I found some rope in the kitchen. Shall I tie them up?" "Do it," Clara nods. "Pa, the water rights documents. We need them now." William moves stiffly to the bed, pushing it aside with Clara's help to reveal a loose floorboard. From beneath it, he retrieves a metal strongbox. "Your mother always said these might need protecting someday," he says, his voice tight with pain. "And something else, pride perhaps, or wonder at what he's just witnessed." As Elizabeth secures the wounded men, Clara explains the situation rapidly. Sheriff Patterson's capture, Caldwell's plan for a dawn execution, and the guardians of the Divide, who are even now heading to the ranch to attempt a rescue. "I knew James was in trouble when he missed our chess game yesterday," William says grimly, opening the strongbox to verify its contents. Inside lie not only the water rights documents, but also a leather-bound journal, Diana Thorne's personal record of her life before Fairfield Farm. "We need to move," Clara urges, taking the papers and securing them inside her coat. "Blackwater will send more men when these don't return." William nods, grabbing his shotgun from the rack. "The mission." "Church! That's the rendezvous point," Clara confirms, surprised. "You know about it?" A ghost of a smile crosses William's battered face. "Your mother wasn't the only one with secrets, Clara. I may not approve of gunplay, but I'm not blind to corruption either." Outside, the storm has intensified, turning the farmyard into a quagmire of mud. They use the weather to their advantage, leading their horses through the orchard rather than taking the main path. The rain washes away their tracks almost as soon as they're made. "The mission's 5 miles west," William says, grimacing as he pulls himself into the saddle. "If we cut through Miller's Gorge, we can be there in half an hour." "Can you ride, Pa?" Clara asks, concerned by the way he holds his ribs. "Been riding with worse," he assures her. "Your mother once saw me through with a Cheyenne arrowhead in my shoulder. This is just some bruising." They set off into the storm, 3 riders navigating by lightning flashes and memory. The rain provides cover, but also makes the going treacherous, forcing them to move slower than Clara would like. Every minute counts with dawn, just hours away. Elizabeth, Clara calls over the wind as they ford a swollen creek. Did you hear anything about where they're keeping the other water rights owners? The Millers, the Jensens, the mining camp, Elizabeth shouts back, the abandoned one in the high country. Caldwell's converted it to a prison camp of sorts. My father was investigating it when they took him. Clara exchanges a look with her. Father, the mining camp is on the opposite side of the valley from the mission church and from Caldwell's ranch. A classic divide-and-conquer strategy, separate the community leaders, prevent unified resistance. We need to warn the Guardians, Clara says. If Caldwell's men realize we've escaped, they might move up the timeline for the sheriff. As they crest a ridge, Miller's Gorge comes into view below, a narrow passage between steep cliffs that will cut miles off their journey to the mission. But something isn't right. Even through the rain, Clara can make out movement at the gorge entrance. Riders, at least 4 of them positioned to block the path. Ambush, William mutters, pulling his horse back into the cover of pine trees. Someone must have gotten word to Blackwater. Clara studies the situation, mind racing. There's another way, she says after a moment. The old game trail behind, Weber's abandoned homestead. It's longer, but they won't expect us to know about it. That trail's barely passable in good weather, William objects. In this storm, it's our only option, Clara interrupts. We can't go back to the farm, and we can't fight through that many men. William studies his daughter's face in the darkness, then nods once. Lead on then. They backtrack a quarter-mile before cutting east toward Weber's place, a failed homestead abandoned 3 years ago after drought claimed both crops and hope. The trail Clara mentioned is indeed treacherous, a narrow path that winds along a cliff face, sections of it washed away by previous storms. Single file, Clara instructs, taking the lead. Test each step before putting your weight down. The next half hour is a grueling test of nerve and skill. The horses, sensing danger, move with exaggerated care, placing each hoof deliberately. Twice, Clara's mount almost loses its footing on the slick rock, saved only by the animal's sure instincts, and Clara's calm handling. Behind her, William rides grimly silent, his face a mask of pain, but his eyes alert. Elizabeth brings up the rear, occasionally glancing back to ensure they aren't being followed. When they finally emerge onto more level ground, even the horses seem to sigh with relief. The mission church is visible in the distance, its bell tower, silhouetted against the stormy sky. We made it, Elizabeth breathes, pushing wet hair from her eyes. Not quite yet, Clara cautions. Let's approach carefully. As they near the church, Clara spots movement in the shadows surrounding the small cemetery. She draws one of her mother's Colts, but a low whistle from the darkness reassures her. 3 notes in a specific pattern, the same signal Silvereye had used earlier. That's the Guardians, she tells the others, holstering her weapon. A figure emerges from behind a weathered gravestone. Mrs. Reed, the stern-faced woman from Silvereye's cabin, her rifle held casually but ready. You made good time, she observes dryly, especially considering the welcoming party Caldwell sent to the gorge. You knew about the ambush? Clara asks, dismounting. Ford spotted them on our way here, Mrs. Reed confirms. Sent me to watch. For you, figuring you'd find another route. She eyes William's battered condition. You look like you've had a personal introduction to Caldwell's hospitality, Mr. Thorne. Nothing that won't heal, William replies, though he accepts Clara's help getting down from his horse. Is Father Thomas here? Inside with the others, Mrs. Reed says, leading them toward the church's side entrance. Including some folks you'll want to meet. The mission church is small but well built, its stone walls providing sanctuary from both weather and enemies. Inside, lanterns cast a warm glow over gathered figures. Some Clara recognizes from town, others strangers to her. Father Thomas, a lean Irishman with prematurely white hair, greets them at the door. Thank God you've made it safely, he says. genuinely relieved. Mr. Sullivan was concerned when you didn't arrive by the expected time. Silver Eye is here? Clara asks, looking around. Not yet, Ford answers, stepping forward. The scarred guardian's clothes are soaked, suggesting he's just arrived himself. He and the others are still at Caldwell's ranch, creating a diversion, while the Elkhorn kid attempts to free Sheriff Patterson. And my father? Elizabeth asks anxiously. No word yet, Ford admits. But Sullivan's not one to fail, miss. If anyone can get your father out, it's him. Clara hands over the water rights documents to Father Thomas. These need to be protected. They prove Caldwell's claims are fraudulent. The priest nods, securing the papers in a hidden compartment beneath the altar. They'll join the others, he says, gesturing to a group of people Clara hadn't noticed before. The Jensens, she exclaims, recognizing the family from a neighboring farm. But I thought that we were at the mining camp. Jacob Jensen finishes, stepping forward. The brawny farmer's usual jovial expression is replaced by grim determination. Some of us were. Some of us escaped. With help, adds a new voice as a tall figure separates from the shadows in the corner. Clara's breath catches as she recognizes the territorial marshal, Augustus Hayes, a legendary lawman whose jurisdiction covers the entire Dakota territory. His silver star gleams in the lantern light, and the twin revolvers at his hips mark him as a man accustomed to trouble. Marshal Hayes, William acknowledges with surprise. I didn't know you were in the valley. Wasn't officially, Hayes replies, his deep voice carrying the hint of a southern drawl. Been tracking Caldwell's operation for months across 3 territories, arrived just in time to help the Guardians spring some of his prisoners from that mining camp. He studies Clara with interest, his weathered face unreadable. You'd be Diana's girl, he says finally. Heard you handled yourself at the farm tonight. Your mother would be proud. Clara blinks in surprise. You knew my mother? Rhoda. With the Guardians a time or two in the early days, Hayes confirms. She was the best shot I ever saw, man or woman. He turns his attention to Ford. What's the plan for the sheriff? Ford spreads a roughly drawn map on a nearby pew. Sullivan's team should be at the ranch by now. Their diversion will draw most of Caldwell's men to the main house, while the kid slips into the slaughterhouse to free Patterson. And if it fails, William asks, the practical farmer asserting himself. Then we move to the second plan, Ford says grimly. A direct assault at dawn with everything we've got. Which isn't much, Mrs. Reed observes. Even with the marshal. Here, we're outnumbered 2-1. Clara studies the map, an idea forming. What about the mining camp? How many men does Caldwell have guarding it now? Skeleton crew, Jensen answers. Maybe 5 men since the marshal's raid. And how many prisoners remain? At least a dozen, Hayes confirms. Mostly men from outlying farms who resisted Caldwell's takeovers. Clara taps the map where the mining camp is marked. Then that's where we strike next. Free those men and our numbers almost double. Ford and Hayes exchange evaluating looks. It could work, the marshal admits, but we'd need to move fast before Caldwell realizes what's happening. I'll lead it, Clara volunteers, checking her mother's guns. I know those mountains better than anyone except Silver Eye. You're just a... Ford begins, then stops himself as Clara's eyes flash dangerously. Just a what, Mr. Ford? She challenges quietly. A girl? A farmer's daughter? I just took down 6 of Caldwell's men without breaking stride. What were you? I'm going to say, the scarred man has the grace to look abashed. I was going to say just arrived, Miss Thorne, and probably exhausted from your ordeal. Clara softens slightly. I've had worse days helping Pa with the spring planting. She should go, Mrs. Reed interjects unexpectedly. Girl's got her mother's eye and her father's level head. That's a combination worth betting on. Marshal Hayes nods slowly. I'll go with her. 2 riders can move faster than a group, and I know the layout of the camp. William starts to object, then stops, looking at his daughter with new understanding. The events of the night have revealed a Clara he never truly knew, or perhaps had chosen not to see. This isn't just his little girl anymore, but a woman coming into the legacy her mother had prepared her for. "Take Willow," he says instead. "She's the surest-footed horse in the valley, and she knows you." Clara nods gratefully. "We'll need supplies, ammunition, medical kit for the prisoners." Father Thomas moves to a cabinet at the back of the church, retrieving a leather satchel. "I keep these ready," he explains, handing the bag to Clara. "Old habits from my days as a field chaplain during the war." As the others prepare for the mission, Elizabeth approaches Clara. "I'm coming with you," she states firmly. "Lizzie, my father's out there," Elizabeth interrupts. "And I'm as good with this," she pats the revolver at her hip, "as you are with those fancy Colts. Almost, anyway." Clara studies her friend's determined expression and recognizes the same steel she feels in herself. "3 is faster than a crowd." "Marshal," she says, glancing at Hayes, "and she knows the territory." The Marshal shrugs. "Your operation, Miss Thorne, your call." "Get fresh horses for you and the Marshal," Clara tells Elizabeth. "We leave in 10 minutes. As Elizabeth hurries to comply, William pulls Clara aside. "You're really doing this," he says, a statement rather than a question. "I have to, Pa. It's what she prepared me for." William touches the silver wing pendant at her throat, his wife's guardian emblem. "I know," he says softly. "I always knew this day might come. Just didn't expect it so soon." He reaches into his pocket and withdraws a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "Your mother wanted you to have this when the time was right. I reckon that's now." Clara takes the paper with trembling fingers, unfolding it to reveal a letter in her mother's elegant handwriting. "Pa, I read it later," he tells her gently. "When this is over, she'd want you focused now." Clara tucks the letter securely inside her shirt, next to her heart. "I won't let you down, either of you." "You never could," William assures her. "Now go. Those men need you." As Clara, Elizabeth and Marshal Hayes prepare to ride out into the storm toward the mining camp, the church bell begins to toll the hour, midnight, marking the transition from one day to the next. A new day is dawning in Redemption Valley. One that will test not just Clara's skill with her mother's guns, but her courage, leadership and heart. The farmer's daughter is gone. In her place stands a guardian of the divide, ready to forge her own legacy. The abandoned mining camp looms against the pre-dawn sky, its weathered structures clinging to the mountainside like stubborn ghosts from a more prosperous era. The storm has passed, leaving behind a crystalline clarity to the air that makes every detail stand out with almost painful sharpness. Clara, Elizabeth and Marshal Hayes observe from the shelter of a pine grove half a mile distant, their breath forming small clouds in the cold mountain air. "5 guards that I can see," Hayes murmurs, lowering his field glasses. 2 at the main entrance, 1 patrolling the perimeter, 2 more by the bunkhouse where they're keeping the prisoners. Clara studies the layout, comparing it to the rough map Ford had sketched. The mining camp consists of a dozen wooden structures arranged in a rough semicircle around what was once the main shaft. The bunkhouse, a long, low building that once housed 40 miners, sits at the far end of the camp, partially obscured by the ore-processing shed. "Where would they post sentries?" she asks, calculating angles and approaches. "Ridgeline to the west gives the best vantage," Hayes replies, indicating the rocky outcropping that rises above the camp. "I'd put at least 1 man up there if I were running this operation." Elizabeth's eyes scan the ridgeline. "There," she whispers, pointing to a nearly invisible movement among the rocks. "See the glint of a rifle barrel?" Clara nods, impressed by her friend's sharp eyes. "That makes 6. Any chance of approaching undetected?" the Marshal considers for a moment. "There's an old ventilation shaft behind the assay office, used to connect to the main tunnels before they flooded. Might get us in without being spotted if it's still passable." "And if it's not?" Elizabeth asks. Hayes' weathered face breaks into a grim smile. Then we do this the loud way. Clara checks her mother's Colts one final time, ensuring both guns are fully loaded and the action smooth. The ivory grips, initially so foreign in her hands, now feel like extensions of herself. We'll try the shaft first. If that fails, I'll create a diversion at the front gate while you two circle around to the bunkhouse. You sure about that split? Hayes questions, his tone respectful but cautious. Might make more sense for me to handle the diversion. Clara meets his gaze evenly. With all due respect, Marshal, I'm the better shot at distance, and the men we're facing won't expect a woman to be the threat. They'll underestimate me, just like Fletcher's men did. We should use that. The Marshal studies her for a long moment, then nods once. Your mother used to say something similar, called it her calico advantage. Being underestimated was her secret weapon. They approached the mining camp from the east, using the deep shadows cast by the rising sun to mask their advance. Leaving their horses concealed in a stand of aspens, they make their way on foot toward the abandoned assay office, a squat stone building that once housed the scales and records for the mine's production. The back of the building has partially collapsed, creating a jumble of stone and timber that provides perfect cover for their approach. Clara takes point, moving with the silent grace Silvereye had drilled into her over countless night-stalking exercises. Elizabeth follows, her movements nearly as quiet, while Hayes brings up the rear, his experience evident in how he constantly scans their surroundings. The ventilation shaft proves to be little more than a narrow chimney descending at a steep angle into darkness, its metal ladder long since rusted away. Only rotting wooden supports remain, spaced unevenly along the shaft walls. It's passable, Clara whispers, peering into the gloom, but we'll need to climb down without the ladder. I'll go first. Before Hayes can object, Clara swings herself into the shaft, bracing her back against one wall and her boots against the opposite side. Using the friction to control her descent, she works her way downward, feeling carefully for each wooden support. 20 feet down, the shaft opens into a horizontal tunnel, one of the auxiliary passages that had once connected to the main mine. Water drips from the ceiling and pools on the floor, but the tunnel itself appears stable. Elizabeth and Hayes soon join her, their faces streaked with dirt and rust from the descent. In the confined space, Hayes' imposing height is even more apparent, as he's forced to stoop slightly to avoid the low ceiling. Bunkhouse should be about 60 yards in that direction, he whispers, pointing along the tunnel, assuming the layout Ford gave us is accurate. They move cautiously through the tunnel, alert for signs of cave-ins or guards. The air grows thicker, with each step, heavy with moisture and the lingering sense of blasting powder and creosote that seem permanently embedded in the timbers. After 50 yards, they encounter a junction where their tunnel meets a wider passage. Hayes raises a hand for them to halt, listening intently. From somewhere ahead comes the muffled sound of men's voices, guards, from the casual tone and occasional laughter. Clara moves to the edge of the junction, peering around the corner. The wider tunnel continues another 30 feet before ending at a set of wooden stairs leading upward. A lantern hangs from a hook at the base of the stairs, casting long shadows that dance along the rough-hewn walls. Those stairs likely lead up into the bunkhouse, Hayes murmurs. Question is, how many guards are positioned at the top? Elizabeth places her ear against the tunnel wall, closing her eyes in concentration. 2 voices, she whispers after a moment. Maybe 3, hard to tell with the echoes. Clara weighs their options. The element of surprise is their greatest advantage, but it will only last for the first few moments of engagement. Once the alarm is raised, they'll be facing the full complement of Caldwell's men. Marshal, she says quietly, you and Elizabeth, head up those stairs. I'll backtrack and find another way into the camp. When you hear gunfire outside, that's your signal to move on the bunkhouse." Hayes frowns. "We agreed you'd only create a diversion if the shaft was impassable." "Plans change," Clara responds, her voice steady. "We need to hit them from two sides simultaneously or we risk losing the advantage. Trust me, Marshal. I can handle myself." After a moment's hesitation, Hayes nods. "Just like her," he mutters, more to himself than to Clara. God help Caldwell's men. Clara retraces their path through the tunnel, moving swiftly now that stealth is less critical. At the ventilation shaft, she opts not to climb back up the way they came, too time-consuming. Instead, she follows the auxiliary tunnel in the opposite direction, reasoning that most ventilation shafts would have multiple access points. Her instinct proves correct when the tunnel begins to slope upward, eventually opening into what was once a storage room for mining supplies. Dust-covered crates and rusted tools litter the floor, undisturbed for years until Clara's passing. A rotting wooden door leads outside, its hinges so corroded that Clara fears it will disintegrate at her touch. She eases it open inch by inch, wincing at each small creak until the gap is wide enough to slip through. She emerges behind the ore processing shed, exactly opposite from the bunkhouse. The camp is beginning to stir with early morning activity. Guards changing shifts, a cook lighting a fire outside what must serve as the mess hall. Clara keeps to the shadows, working her way toward the front of the camp. Her plan is audacious, but simple. Create enough chaos at the main entrance to draw attention away from the bunkhouse, giving Hayes and Elizabeth their opportunity. The rising sun gilds the eastern horizon as Clara positions herself behind an abandoned wagon with a clear view of the main gate. The two guards stationed there look bored and sleepy, clearly not expecting trouble at this early hour. One leans against a post, smoking a cigarette, while the other half-heartedly paces a short circuit. Clara calculates distances and angles, planning her shots. The sentry on the ridgeline is her first priority. He has the best vantage point and could easily pick off Hayes and Elizabeth if they're spotted leaving the bunkhouse with the prisoners. Settling into a shooter's stance, Clara draws her right-hand Colt, takes a breath, and steadies her aim. The distance to the ridgeline is extreme for a handgun, nearly 200 yards, but Diana Thorne hadn't raised an ordinary markswoman. The shot cracks across the morning stillness, finding its mark with unerring precision. The sentry on the ridge jerks backward, his rifle tumbling down the rocks as he clutches his shoulder. Before the echo fades, Clara has shifted aim and fired twice more in rapid succession, disarming the two gate guards before they can fully register what's happening. Matisu. Camp erupts into chaos, men shouting and running toward the gate, while others seek cover, unsure where the shots originated. Clara uses their confusion to change position, sprinting to an abandoned ore cart that offers both protection and a different angle of fire. From her new vantage point, she can see guards converging on the main gate, exactly as she'd hoped. She fires again, deliberately striking the ground near a cluster of men, forcing them to scatter and dive for cover. Each shot is calculated to create maximum disruption while avoiding lethal harm whenever possible. Across the camp, gunfire erupts from the direction of the bunkhouse, Hayes and Elizabeth making their move. Clara intensifies her barrage, ensuring all attention remains fixed on the phantom threat at the gate rather than the actual jailbreak occurring behind them. A bullet whines past her ear, too close for comfort. One of Caldwell's men has spotted her position. Time to move. She holsters her right Colt and draws the left, firing twice to keep heads down as she dashes toward a stack of timber that will provide better cover. The morning air fills with gun smoke and shouts of confusion. Through gaps in the commotion, Clara catches glimpses of activity at the bunkhouse. Men emerging, some supporting others who can barely walk after weeks of imprisonment. Hayes and Elizabeth bring up the rear, covering the retreat of the freed prisoners. Clara's diversion has worked perfectly, but now she faces the challenge of extracting herself. She's effectively pinned down, with at least 4 of Caldwell's men focusing their fire on her position. The stack of timber won't provide protection for long. She counts her remaining ammunition, 7 rounds in her left Colt, 4 in her right. Not enough to shoot her way out conventionally. "There she is," a voice shouts, closer than the others. "It's just one shooter." Clara smiles grimly, still underestimating her. Good. In one fluid motion she stands and fires both guns simultaneously, not at the men, but at the supports holding up an abandoned water tank that looms above the center of the camp. Her aim is true, the aged wood splintering under the impact of 4 perfectly placed shots. The tank groans, tilts, and then crashes down, thousands of gallons of stagnant water exploding outward in a miniature flood that sweeps across the central area of the camp. Men shout in alarm, scrambling to avoid the deluge, as Clara uses the distraction to break from cover and sprint toward the edge of the camp, where Hayes, Elizabeth, and the freed prisoners are making their escape. "That was one hell of a diversion," Hayes comments as she joins them, a newfound respect evident in his tone. "Learned from the best," Clara replies, catching her breath. "Are these all the prisoners?" "All 14. Elizabeth confirms, helping a gaunt farmer onto a horse. "Some are in rough shape, but they can ride." The freed men, despite their weakened condition, move with determined efficiency, farmers and ranchers accustomed to pushing. Through hardship, they mount the horses Hayes had arranged to have waiting in the aspen grove, doubling up where necessary. "We need to move quickly," Clara urges, checking over her shoulder. "Once they reorganize, they'll be coming after us." Hayes nods grimly, "And they'll send word to Caldwell. If Silver Eye hasn't already freed the sheriff, they may accelerate their timetable." The group sets off down the mountain, taking a route than their ascent. The freed prisoners share information as they ride, details about Caldwell's operation, the schedule of his men, and most importantly, confirmation that Victor Caldwell himself is expected at the ranch for Sheriff Patterson's trial at dawn. "He likes to witness the examples he makes," explains Martin Miller, one of the water rights holders who'd been imprisoned for nearly 2 weeks. "Wants everyone to know the punishment for defying him comes directly from his hand." Clara processes this information, formulating a plan. "Then we know where he'll be and when. That's to our advantage." "You're not thinking of going after Caldwell directly?" Elizabeth asks, concern evident in her voice. "Not alone," Clara clarifies, "but if we can coordinate with Silver Eye and the others, we might have a chance to end this once and for all." Hayes studies her with new interest. "Your mother always said the best shot is the one you don't have to take. Political types like Caldwell prefer to let others do their dirty work. If we can catch him in the act of ordering an execution, the territorial governor would have no choice but to act." "Exactly," Clara nods. "We don't need to outgun him, we need to outsmart him." As they descend toward the valley floor, the mission church comes into view, its simple spire catching the morning light. Clara can make out increased activity around the building. More riders have arrived during their absence. William Thorne rides out to meet them, relief evident on his face when he spots Clara, followed quickly by concern as he notes her dust-covered appearance and the spent shells in her gun belt. "Success, I see," he says, helping one of the weakened prisoners. "Dismount. 14 men freed," Clara confirms. "Any word from Silver Eye?" William's expression sobers. "Ford returned an hour ago with 3 fingers. They created their diversion at the ranch as planned, but couldn't get close to the slaughterhouse. Too many guards. The Elkhorn kid hasn't returned, and there's been no sign of Silver Eye or Sheriff Patterson." Clara's heart sinks. "So the rescue failed?" "Not necessarily," Ford interjects, approaching on horseback. The scarred guardian's arm is roughly bandaged. Evidence of the firefight at Caldwell's ranch. Sullivan knows more ways in and out of that valley than a coyote. He might still pull it off. And if he doesn't? Elizabeth asks, the fear for her father evident in her voice. Ford exchanges a look with Hayes. Then we're looking at a direct confrontation at Caldwell's ranch. Dawn is 3 hours away. Clara absorbs this news, running calculations in her head. How many men can we field? 22 now with the freed prisoners, William answers, though some are in no condition to fight. Against Caldwell's 40, Hayes adds grimly. Not favorable odds. Clara looks around at the gathering force. Farmers, ranchers, a few townspeople who'd joined the resistance overnight. Not professional gunmen, but men and women fighting for their homes and their future. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for in determination. We don't need favorable odds, she says with sudden clarity. We need a plan that doesn't rely on them. She turns to Ford. You said Caldwell's expecting the territorial governor next week. Would he have prepared for that visit? Made his operation look legitimate? Ford nods slowly, catching her drift. He's been having his men clean up the ranch, put on a respectable face, even had proper uniforms made for his so-called security force. And where would those uniforms be kept? Storage room off the main house, Miller offers. Saw them being delivered. Before they threw me in the camp, Clara's mind races, a plan forming. We don't have the numbers to attack head-on, but we might have enough to infiltrate. Hayes raises an eyebrow. You're suggesting we walk right in? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Clara confirms, a dangerous smile playing at her lips. While they're expecting an attack from the outside, we'll already be inside. William Thorne studies his daughter with a mixture of concern and pride. It's risky, Clara. If they identify even one of you, then we make sure they don't, she responds confidently. Ford, you know the layout of the ranch. Can you draw up detailed plans? We need to know every entrance, exit, and blind spot. As the others gather to discuss the infiltration strategy, Elizabeth pulls Clara aside, her expression troubled. What aren't you saying? She asks quietly. I know that look. You've got something else in mind. Clara hesitates, then nods. The infiltration team is just part of the plan. While they're focused on positioning themselves inside, I'm going after Blackwater. Clara, that's suicide. He never travels without at least 4 men. I don't plan to confront him directly, Clara explains. But I need to know where Silver Eye and your father are being held. Blackwater knows, and I intend to make him tell me. Elizabeth's eyes widen. You're going to capture Jackson Blackwater? The man who's killed more people than smallpox? Clara checks her mother's Colts, a cold determination settling over her. I'm going to do what needs to be done, Lizzie. I owe it to Silver Eye. He believed in me when no one else did. Then I'm coming with you, Elizabeth declares, her tone brooking no argument. Clara starts to protest, then reconsiders. Elizabeth has proven herself resourceful and steady under pressure, and there's no denying the justice in her desire to help rescue her father. All right, she concedes, but we do this my way, no unnecessary risks. As the 2 young women rejoin the larger group, Clara can't help but feel the weight of what's to come. This isn't just about protecting the farm anymore. It's about standing against corruption and violence that threatens an entire community. It's about honoring her mother's legacy while forging her own. The first light of dawn is less than 3 hours away. In Redemption Valley, that light will either reveal justice restored or the final triumph of Victor Caldwell's tyranny. And much of it now rests on the shoulders of a farmer's daughter who has proven to be so much more. Moonlight bathes Caldwell's ranch in silver as Clara and Elizabeth creep through the tall grass beyond the perimeter fence. The main house, a sprawling 2-story structure built with ill-gotten wealth, sits atop a gentle rise, windows ablaze with lamplight despite the late hour. Unusual activity buzzes around the property. Men hurry between outbuildings, voices Call orders, and horses stamp nervously in their corrals. "They know something's coming," Elizabeth whispers, her father's spare revolver clutched in her hand. Clara nods, studying the scene through Silver Eye's brass spyglass. The marshals and freed prisoners should be in position by now, strategically placed around the ranch's perimeter, ready to move on Hayes's signal. But first, Clara and Elizabeth need to locate Blackwater, and through him find Silver Eye and Sheriff Patterson. "There," Clara breathes, focusing the spyglass on a figure striding purposefully from the main house toward the old slaughterhouse. Even at this distance, Blackwater's distinctive black duster and confident gait are unmistakable. He's heading for the slaughterhouse alone. This might be our only chance. They circle wide, using a dry creek bed for cover until they reach the back of the slaughterhouse, a low stone building with a rusted metal roof that had once processed cattle for the ranch. Now it processes men who cross Victor Caldwell. A single guard leans against the rear door, rifle held loosely, more concerned with his cigarette than his duty. Clara signals Elizabeth to hold position, then slips forward silently. Years of stalking deer through these mountains have made her movements fluid and nearly soundless. The guard never hears Clara approach. The butt of her Colt connects with the base of his skull, and he crumples without a sound. Elizabeth darts forward to help Clara drag him into the shadows and bind him with strips of his own bandana. Inside, the slaughterhouse air hangs thick with the metallic scent of blood, both old and fresh. Clara follows the sound of voices to a partially open door, where yellow light spills onto the stone floor. Through the crack, she can see Blackwater pacing before two men tied to support pillars. One is Sheriff Patterson, his face a map of bruises, but his eyes defiant. The other is Silver Eye Sullivan, whose single good eye remains sharp, despite the dried blood caking the side of his head. "Dawn's coming early for you boys," Blackwater is saying, checking his pocket watch. "Mr. Caldwell wants to make this official, a proper trial for corruption, even bringing the newspaper editor to document it." He laughs, the sound devoid of humor. "Justice served and all that. Only corruption in this valley wears your boss's face." Silver Eye spits, earning himself a backhanded blow that rocks his head sideways. "Funny thing about justice," Blackwater continues, wiping his knuckles. "It belongs to whoever has the power to enforce it. And in Redemption Valley, that's Mr. Caldwell." Clara catches Elizabeth's eye, signaling their approach. 2 against 1 should be manageable, except Blackwater's reputation isn't built on exaggeration. The man has reportedly killed 11 men in fair fights, and considerably more in unfair ones. Before they can act, the front door of the slaughterhouse bangs open. 2 more of Caldwell's men enter, dragging a third figure between them. "Found this one trying to sneak onto the property," one announces, throwing their captive to the floor. "Claims he has information." Clara's blood freezes as the lamplight reveals the battered face of Nathan Ford, the scarred guardian who should be coordinating their forces outside. His capture changes everything. Well, well, Blackwater smiles, crouching beside the fallen man, the famous guardian of the divide. Not so mysterious up close. He grabs Ford's hair, yanking his head back. "What information could possibly be? Worth risking your neck, guardian?" Ford's eyes dart towards Silver Eye, then back to Blackwater. "The girl, the farmer's daughter. I know where she is, what she's planning." Clara's stomach twists. Is Ford betraying them to save himself? Or is this some desperate gambit, Clara Thorne? Blackwater laughs. "That slip of a girl who got lucky at the Thorne farm? What could she possibly plan that would concern me?" Ford coughs, spitting blood. "She's Diana Thorne's daughter. The change in Blackwater's demeanor is immediate and electric. He goes utterly still, his smile vanishing. Diana Quickdraw Thorne, the exhibition shooter." A look of disbelief crosses his face. "That's impossible. Diana Thorne died years ago. Her daughter didn't." Ford's eyes hold a gleam of satisfaction at Blackwater's reaction. And she's every bit the shot her mother was, maybe better. Blackwater's hand moves to the scar on his right cheek, a souvenir, Clara suddenly realizes, from her mother. Where is she? Ford smiles through bloody teeth. Closer than you think. Clara makes her decision instantly, signaling Elizabeth to take the rear position. They need to move now, while surprise is still possible. She checks her mother's Colts one final time, draws a deep breath, and kicks the door fully open. "Right here, Blackwater!" she calls, both guns leveled at his chest. The tableau freezes for a heartbeat. Blackwater half-crouched by Ford, the two guards with hands halfway to their weapons, Silver Eye and the sheriff still bound to the pillars. Then everything explodes into motion. Clara's first shots drop the two guards before they can clear leather. She deliberately aims for shoulders and legs, incapacitating rather than killing. Blackwater, however, moves with unnatural speed, diving behind a wooden table as her bullets splinter the wood where he'd stood a split second before. Elizabeth slips inside, circling quickly toward the prisoners while Clara keeps Blackwater pinned down. "Lizzie, look out!" Sheriff Patterson shouts as Blackwater rises from behind his cover, firing twice in rapid succession. Clara throws herself sideways as bullets whine past her ear. She returns fire while rolling to her feet, but Blackwater is already moving again, using the shadows and equipment for cover. The man is fast, faster than anyone she's faced before. "You do shoot like your mother," Blackwater calls from somewhere in the darkness. "She gave me this scar in Cheyenne, years before she played at being a respectable farmer's wife." His voice seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. "But you're still green, girl, still hesitating before the kill shot." Clara moves silently, along the wall, trying to pinpoint his location. "Seems to me you're the one hiding, Blackwater." A chuckle answers her from the shadows. "Not hiding, hunting." A gunshot cracks from her left. Clara drops instinctively as the bullet whispers overhead. She returns fire instantly, her Colt barking twice toward the muzzle flash. A grunt of pain rewards her aim. Not a killing shot. "But she's drawn blood. First blood to you," Blackwater acknowledges, his voice now holding a tighter edge. "But this ends now." Clara senses rather than sees his rush from the darkness. She pivots, both Colts rising, but Blackwater crashes into her before she can fire, sending them both sprawling. One of her guns skitters across the stone floor. They grapple in the semi-darkness, Blackwater's strength nearly overwhelming. Clara drives her knee upward, connecting solidly. He grunts, but doesn't release his grip on her remaining gun hand, slamming it repeatedly against the floor until her fingers go numb and the weapon falls away. "Just like your mother," Blackwater hisses, his face inches from hers as he pins her down. "Too stubborn to know when you're beaten?" His free hand draws a wicked-looking knife from his boot. "At least she died peacefully in bed. You won't be so lucky." As the knife descends, a gunshot thunders in the enclosed space. Blackwater jerks, a look of surprise crossing his face. Behind him stands Elizabeth, her father's revolver still smoking. "That's for my father," she says coldly. Blackwater slumps sideways, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his knife clattering to the floor. Clara scrambles up, retrieving her dropped Colt and training it on him. "It's over, Blackwater," she states. "Where's Caldwell?" A wheezing laugh escapes him. "You're too late, girl. Dawn comes in 30 minutes. Caldwell's already on his way with 20 armed men. You can't stop what's coming." Clara exchanges glances with Elizabeth, who's cutting silver. I and the sheriff free. The old sharpshooter's single good eye burns with pride as he looks at Clara. "She got you good, Blackwater," he observes with satisfaction, just like her mother would have. Ford struggles to his feet, wincing. "We need to warn the others. If Caldwell's moving up his timetable," a commotion erupts outside, shouts and the distinctive crack of rifle fire. Through the slaughterhouse windows, Clara sees torches moving toward the main house. The infiltration plan has been compromised. Sounds like the warning just became unnecessary, Sheriff Patterson says grimly, rubbing circulation back into his wrists. The fight started whether we're ready or not. Clara makes her decision instantly. Elizabeth, get your father and Ford to safety. Silver Eye, you're with me. She reloads both Colts with practiced efficiency. We're going after Caldwell. The battle for Redemption Valley has begun in earnest, and at its center stands a farmer's daughter, her mother's guns gleaming in the lamplight, ready to write her own legend. Orange streaks of dawn illuminate the chaos engulfing Caldwell's ranch. The main house stands partially ablaze, flames licking hungrily at its eastern wing. Gunfire cracks sporadically across the property as Caldwell's remaining men exchange shots with Hayes' forces from increasingly desperate positions. Clara and Silver Eye crouch behind an overturned wagon near the stables, pinned down by rifle fire from the second floor of the barn. Between them and their target, Victor Caldwell himself, stand 6 loyal gunmen forming a protective cordon around their employer. He's making for the private rail spur, Silver Eye mutters, peering through a gap in the wagon boards. That locomotive's fired up and ready to go. Clara spots it now, a sleek black engine with a single luxury passenger car idling on the narrow-gauge track that connects Caldwell's ranch directly to the main line. Steam billows from its stack, a clear sign of imminent departure. If he reaches that train, we'll never see him again, she says, checking her ammunition. 4 rounds in her right Colt, 2 in her left, not enough for a frontal assault against 6 armed men. Silver Eye touches her arm, drawing her attention to movement along the eastern fence line. William Thorne leads a group of farmers in a flanking maneuver, using the smoke from the burning house as cover. Among them, Clara recognizes the gaunt faces of men they'd freed from the mining camp, now armed and determined to balance the scales of justice. Pie's creating our diversion, Clara realizes. We need to move the moment they engage. Not we, Silver Eye corrects, his weathered face solemn. You go after Caldwell. I'll handle those riflemen in the barn. Before she can protest, he adds, your mother would never forgive me if I let you get shot by some barn-dwelling coward while you were doing the important work. Gunfire erupts from the eastern perimeter as William's group opens fire immediately, drawing return fire from Caldwell's men. In the confusion, Silver Eye slips away, moving with surprising agility for a man his age as he circles toward the rear of the barn. Clara counts to 10, then dashes from cover, keeping low as she sprints between outbuildings. The morning air tastes of smoke and gunpowder, the familiar sense of the farm now transformed into something dangerous and vital. Each breath feels charged with possibility as she closes the distance to her quarry. Victor Caldwell stands on the private platform, surrounded by his dwindling protection detail. Even at this distance, Clara can see the precise cut of his eastern suit, the grey at his temples, the walking stick with its silver handle. All the trappings of respectability that disguise a predator's heart. From the barn, unexpected gunfire erupts as Silver Eye engages the rifleman. Several of Caldwell's bodyguards turn toward this new threat, momentarily dividing their attention. It's the opening Clara needs. She emerges from behind the water tower, both Colts leveled. "Victor Caldwell," she calls, her voice carrying clearly, across the suddenly silent yard. "You're done in Redemption Valley." Caldwell turns, his aristocratic features registering first surprise, then contempt, as he takes in the dust-covered young woman confronting him. "A girl with guns," he says dismissively, though he steps behind one of his men. "Charming frontier entertainment, but I have a train to catch." "The only place you're going is a territorial prison," Clara responds, advancing steadily. "For murder, corruption, and land theft." Caldwell sighs theatrically. "My dear, I have judges in my pocket all the way to Chicago. Now, gentlemen," he addresses his remaining guards, "remove this annoyance." 4 guns raise simultaneously. Clara, drops to one knee as she fires both Colts with lethal precision. Two guards fall immediately, one clutching his shoulder, another his leg. The third man's gun hand erupts in blood as Clara's bullet finds its mark between his knuckles. The fourth guard gets off a shot that sings past Clara's ear before her return fire sends him stumbling backward off the platform. She rises in one fluid motion, her right Colt now empty, her left holding a single round. Only Caldwell remains, his mask of civilized disdain slipping to reveal the panic beneath. His hand emerges from his coat with a derringer, a gentleman's last resort. "You may shoot me, girl," he snarls, "but another will take my place. Men like me built this territory, and men like me will always rule it." Clara's final bullet strikes the derringer, sending it spinning from Caldwell's grip. He looks at his empty hand in disbelief as she closes the distance between them. "Not anymore," Clara says, holstering her empty guns and delivering a precise right hook that drops the railroad baron to his knees. "And I'm not just a girl with guns. I'm Diana Thorne's daughter." Recognition floods Caldwell's face, followed by genuine fear. "Thorne? You can't be—" "She is," confirmed Sheriff Patterson, limping onto the platform with Marshal Hayes and Elizabeth flanking him. "And she just ended your reign, Caldwell." Hayes steps forward, official papers in hand. "Victor Caldwell, by the authority of the territorial governor, I'm placing you under arrest for corruption, extortion, land fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." As Hayes recites the charges, Clara steps away, suddenly aware of the silence that has fallen across the ranch. The gunfire has ceased. In the growing daylight, she sees Caldwell's men emerging with hands raised, surrendering to the farmers, ranchers, and townspeople they'd terrorized for months. William Thorne approaches the platform, his shotgun resting, and casually, in the crook of his arm, his eyes find his daughter's, conveying pride deeper than words could express. "Sheriff Patterson," he says, though his gaze remains on Clara, "I believe the governor will need a full accounting of today's events. Someone should ride to Bismarck." Patterson nods, understanding the deeper meaning. Clara would be the logical choice. She saw most of it firsthand. 2 weeks later, Clara Thorne rides back into Redemption Valley at the head of a column of territorial militia. The governor had not only listened to her account, but had immediately dispatched troops to secure the area and begin dismantling Caldwell's corrupt network. Fairfield Farm comes into view as she crests the final ridge, its fields now shimmering with early summer wheat. The farmhouse stands freshly painted, the new white boards replacing those damaged during Fletcher's raid gleaming in the sunlight. In town, a celebration awaits. Sheriff Patterson, reinstated with the governor's formal apology, has declared a holiday to welcome back the savior of Redemption Valley. Elizabeth rides out to meet her, her face alight with excitement. "They're calling you Dead-Eye Clara now," she announces with a grin. "Silver Eye says that's better than any nickname he ever earned." Clara shakes her head, though she can't suppress a smile. "I'm still just a farmer's daughter." "No," Elizabeth corrects her, suddenly serious. "You're much more than that now. You're a guardian of the divide, like your mother before you." At the farm that evening, after the celebrations have died down, Clara stands beneath the old oak tree with her father. The silver wing pendant that had belonged to her mother now hangs openly around her neck, catching the sunset's warm glow. "Your mother's letter," William says quietly. "Did you read it?" Clara nods, her fingers touching the worn paper in her pocket. Diana's words had been few but powerful, a benediction across time, giving her daughter permission to embrace both sides of her heritage, the quiet strength of the farmer and the deadly precision of the guardian. "She knew this day would come," Clara says. "She prepared me for it my whole life." William gazes across his fields, the land he'd fought so hard to keep. "The governor offered you a marshal's badge," he observes. "Are you considering it?" Clara. watches as Silver Eye approaches from the direction of his cabin, flanked by Marshal Hayes and several other guardians. Their presence in Redemption Valley is no longer a secret. They walk openly now, silver wings glinting on lapels and hatbands. "I'm considering many things, Pa," she answers thoughtfully. "The valley needs protection, and not just from men like Caldwell. There are others like him across the territory." William nods, a mixture of resignation and pride in his expression. "Your mother used to say that sometimes the plough needs to be set aside for the gun, but only so you can return to ploughing in peace." As the guardians gather under the oak tree, Clara feels the weight of her mother's matched Colts at her hips, no longer foreign, but as natural as the calluses on her farmer's hands. Two legacies merged into one, just as Diana had intended. Redemption Valley stretches before her, free from Caldwell's shadow, and beyond it, other valleys, other towns where justice rides with those brave enough to stand together. Clara Thorne, farmer's daughter and gunslinging prodigy, steps forward to meet her. Destiny. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.